Okay everyone, we've got a big video for you today on the channel as we find out all about Celtic's latest signing, Hyeongyu Oh, with not one but two insight guests, as well as the man himself who I spoke to alongside the rest of Celtic fan media at Celtic Park recently. So fair to say, if you don't know too much about our latest signing, watch this video and you should know much more by the end. Just briefly before we get our first guest involved, Hyeongyu Oh signed for around £2.5 million. He's joined on a 5-year deal and will take the number 19 jersey, which was actually worn by Mikey Johnson before he went on loan to Portugal. So whether we can read anything into that or not, I guess is for another video. Okay, we're going to dip between various interviews and the man himself, as I say, and we're starting with Ross Davis, who you may well have seen floating around on Twitter. Ross is at K-League English on Twitter. He's a K-League analyst for Smart Odds. Great to have you on, Ross. We've obviously had a lot of chat about the J-League and players from Japan over the last 18 months. So just kind of set the scene for us with regards to the K-League. Is there equal opportunities there for Celtic with regards to real good talent for pretty low prices?
Yeah, I would say so. Thanks for having me on as well. I I would say usually the K League offers maybe even more bargains than the J League, but in this case, Suwon were quite hard pressed to sell them, and eventually kind of squeezed the most out of you, I think. But definitely a bargain, and the talent's definitely in the league, similar to Japan in many ways.
In terms of the team themselves, Suwon, Samsung Blue Wings, who all played for, they weren't one of the better teams in the K-League One. In fact, they only stayed up via a playoff last season.
You could say that they only stayed up via O, really.
Right.
He's 13 goals in the league, and then in that playoff he got the winning goal as well. And if it hadn't been for him, they would have been relegated for the first time in their history. They're traditionally quite a big team here, but the past 5 or so years they've been very much underfunded and rely on their youth. With O being another example of that kind of process.
Yeah, so he's 21 years old, still young. He's really been playing maybe for the last 2, 3, 4 seasons. When did you first hear about him as a player?
He was quite well known even when he burst on the scene. When I think he was like 18, like people knew about him, and like I said, like Suwon's youth academy is probably one of the most famous over here. And he went off and did his military service, which wasn't
Hmm.
that common a thing for young players to do. It's becoming more common. He did it very early, and he played in the second tier for them most of the season. Didn't set the world on fire, but he's always been well known within the league for being very talented, and he showed that in the second half of last season. It's just how good he is.
I did want to ask you about that at the end, but I'll ask you now. Just the military service stuff. Some Celtic fans may remember it from, I think Ki Sung Young was the player maybe about 12 or 13 years ago, who there was a lot of chat about him.
Mm-hmm.
Just to explain, most kind of male adults have to, take part in military service at some point before a certain age, and as you
Mm-hmm.
say, O has already done it, which Ange actually referenced in his
Mm-hmm.
interview yesterday.
Yeah, so like you said, yeah, most pretty much all have to do it, and if you're a football player, it can impede your career, especially
Mm.
going to Europe. So in part, that's probably one of the reasons why he's done it early, and that's also becoming a bit more of a theme. People do it early and get out of the way, and then they're free to go abroad. Son Min had to win the Asian Games gold medal to be exempt. Otherwise, he would have been coming back to the league, and it's a huge barrier for people going abroad. So for O to have already done it is great news for you guys.
Yeah, and as I say, Ange mentioned it, so he clearly is well aware of that as being a positive as well. So he knows where the goal is, I think it's fair to say. 13 goals last season for a Blue Wing side, as we say, threatened by relegation. Is that the main thing that kind of strikes out about him, the fact that he does score goals?
Yeah, absolutely. He's a fierce competitor. He'll be you won't find him losing too many duels with his defender. He's not the tallest, but he's very strong. He doesn't mind taking his shirt off when he scores, and you can see how strong he is. But he is the main goal threat. He's the number 9, very much inside the box. He's very dangerous with his head, even though he's not the tallest. Right footed, but not afraid to take shots on his left. He scored with his left right head this season, and yeah, he's a goal scorer. Needs to improve. I'm sure Ange is a great coach to be doing that on the build up side and all that, but
Right.
he's a massive goal for it. Yeah.
So we're chatting now to Mark, who is the K-League Celt on Twitter. You may have seen him floating around. Mark, you've got an interesting story because people will find out when you speak you're Scottish. They can probably see you're a Celtic fan already and you're in South Korea. So tell us a little bit about yourself and how that story goes.
So basically, the story started, I guess, in 2002 when there was a World Cup that was here, and obviously Scotland, as always, never qualified. So I had to choose a team, and just I don't know, I remember watching the kind of scenes in what was called City Hall in Kwangaman, which is the area where the big kind of TV screens were set up, and there was a million people dressed up in red with devil horns, and I was like, oh wow, I need to go to that country one day. So in 2007, I came here for 1 year to teach, and I'm still here 16 years later, still in the same company. But as you said, huge Celtic fan, obviously. The one of the interesting things was the 1 million people that watched Korea in that tournament only actually watched Korea in the World Cup. They don't actually go and watch their local K-League teams.
Right.
So the attendances are not great. But I've now watched in Korea. I've watched I think that's 4 World Cups live in the square with those kind of fans all kind of singing and dancing. As you can see by this badge here as well, we have what's called the Seoul CSC,
Right.
which that's the more interesting story. Actually, it was actually set up by a Korean kid. His name is Tom. His Korean name is Sungmin, but his English name is Tom. And he's a Songnam FC fan, which is the team that I support here in Korea as well. And he was looking. He was on football forums and he was looking for a club that kind of aligned with his politics. And he found Celtic, but he couldn't really understand what everyone was saying, on the Huddle Board and Kerrydale Street and that sort of stuff. So he actually taught himself Scottish using YouTube videos of Chewing the Fat and Burnston. So he actually has a stronger Scottish accent than me, despite the fact he never lived in Scotland. So he was the president, he was the founder basically, and the president of the Seoul CSC. And so he's still here. He's a guy that's been, if you look on the Seoul CSC Twitter account, it's been pretty busy these last couple of weeks. He's the main guy that's been running all those kind of tweets and stuff, kind of breaking all the news about O and about Cho as well and stuff.
It's amazing. I just love this thing of CSCs around the world. It's amazing some of the stories behind them. Yeah, I mean, it's going to be good to get your insight because you obviously follow Celtic and you'll also know about O and various other things. I know one thing you wanted to bring up was the long drawn out nature of the deal, and I know this is something that Ange touched on. Did you want to explain some difficulties in negotiating contracts in South Korea?
So basically, yeah. I mean, I think Ange has said that he thought O would be the first signing of the whole transfer window, right? And I know, a lot of people were getting concerned, but particularly with Peter Lawwell back in the scene in the house, and kind of contracts were drawn out. People were like, "Oh no, are we kind of penny pinching and stuff?" But it's not really unusual in Korea, if someone is kind of transferring overseas for these contracts to kind of drag out. In Korea, there's 2 kind of ways of forming a club. You have what's called the chaebol, which is the big corporate companies, and you have what's called the citizen clubs, which are actually run by councils. So O played for Suwon, technically Suwon Samsung Blue Wings, which are owned by Samsung. And so when you're kind of dealing with them, you're as well as dealing with a football club, you're dealing with that kind of board of directors, that you're kind of dealing with a corporate, like a kind of corporation, not just like a football team. If you deal with my club Songnam, you're dealing with a council, not just like a football board. So these contracts the ones in Korea are pretty quick, but the ones when players have been transferred overseas, they tend to kind of drag out a little bit. Also, quite funny is like there's a lot of kind of really strange kind of clauses put in contracts when people do transfer overseas as well. For example, Hyeongyu Oh, who played at Celtic, even though he went to Celtic and then I think it was like Swansea and then Middlesbrough, when he came back to Korea, he wanted to actually join Ulsan, who were the team that won the K-League 1 last year. But there was actually a clause in his contract that said that FC Seoul, the club that sold him to Celtic, had first refusal on his contract. And he could not join any other club unless that club paid FC Seoul like $1 million or something, which no club was prepared to pay the money to Seoul, one of their rivals, right?
Yeah.
So that's why Key moved to Spain initially for like Real Mallorca maybe for like 6 months, and then he actually moved back and he ended up going to Seoul because he had no other choice. Yeah. So there's all these kind of clauses in contracts. You have players, that go overseas that haven't done their military service, and those clubs, when those players leave Korea, there's a clause in the contract that says they must come back and play for that club before they do their military service. Now, O's done his military service, but still, yeah, it doesn't really surprise me. But when you're dealing with, like Samsung, you're dealing with like Hyundai, for example, or the team is the company that runs Jeonbuk, which is where Cho Ki-sun plays.
Mm-hmm.
It doesn't surprise me that those contracts have taken ages. So I don't think, Ange was making things up, but when he said like O was his first target, I'm sure he was. The other, like the Japanese players were just like Alison Johnson, were just easier to get those contracts done. In Korea, nothing in Korea goes quickly. Everything that involves these kind of businessmen takes a long, long time. Usually a lot of dinners, a lot of drinking and stuff as well. Yeah. So it doesn't surprise me that took a long time.
That's really interesting, actually, because it's something that Ange was the first thing I think he mentioned when he was asked about. Just to clarify, by the way, I think you might be the right guy to ask here. What's the pronunciation we're going for with his name?
So I think he's romanized it as Oh Hyeongyu. So Oh Hyeongyu. It's either Q or Gyu, but I think he's romanized it as KYU. I think is what he did. It's really interesting because they again going back to Key. I mean the romanization. The English of Key's name is nothing like the Korean. Like it's just what Key decided he wanted his English spelling to look like. So I think O is going with Oh Hyun-kyu, yeah?
So we'll call him O, effectively. That's what we're known as. It must be the shortest name in Celtic history.
I think it's really interesting as well because the Japanese players have all gone with their what we call your given name, like your first name, right?
But only Kyogo is taken off, which is strange. The rest are still known by their surname, which is bizarre.
Yeah,
but anyway.
Yeah, but I mean, like for example, they all have like their actual first name on the back of their shirts. So when O signed, people were wondering, will he follow that and have the Hyeongyu? Which is just really weird for a Korean, or will we have O? And he obviously took O, yeah. But this is, as you said, it's the shortest name I think any Celtic player's ever had, right?
Yeah. Well, although I'm thinking of Key now, so but I suppose
Key Sung-young.
But I just wanted to clarify that we've kind of been on for a while and we haven't even spoken about the player properly. So you know about O, you know about Celtic. How do you think he's going to fit in?
I think it might take him a bit of time to actually start. His last game was in December when Blue Wings played Anyang in the relegation playoff. It's actually O scored the winning goal in the last touch of the ball in extra time. He did go to Qatar with the World Cup squad, but it was just for the experience because Bento wanted him to be around that group of players. Which is an interesting thing because he also they were actually really impressed by his kind of attitude there as well. Even though he wasn't playing, he was still kind of turning up for training and stuff. So I think he's going to fit in really well. I think the fans are going to love him. I mean, there's like a lot of kind of sort of viral video clips going around these days right now, primarily because they talk about his move. And yeah, I mean, he's like a big kind of strong striker. Like he doesn't take any nonsense. Like in Korea, Korean defenders kind of bounce off him. But when he starts making a run into the box, it's kind of like he gets to go where he wants to go. He's really good at creating space. So I think in terms of goal scoring, his goals are quite similar to like Giamakis. Like they're kind of generally like in the box. He doesn't score anything from like 20 yards and stuff. It's all like like within the box. But I think the biggest difference is that he drags the defenders like all over the place. Like he's continually making runs out into the wings. So I think he's also going to create a lot of space. Like for Kyogo. Like he's going to create space. Like for kind of maybe like O'Reilly coming forward and stuff like that as well. So like, I do think. I think I can definitely see why Ange has signed him. He's kind of not that he's quick, but he runs around like all day. Like he kind of, like he throws himself in front of the ball. He kind of like block things on the goal line and stuff. Like he plays with his heart. That's I think Ange actually said that. That he's kind of really. He has a lot of kind of heart and really kind of strong character, and that's how he plays. So I think the fans will love him. When I heard that it was between him and Cho, that when I first heard those two names, O was the one I wanted. Like immediately, he was the one I wanted.
The manager said that O was the striker he really wanted. Can I ask how that makes O feel to know that the manager said that?
굉장히 기분 좋았고, 네, 저도 더 잘할 수 있을 거라는 생각이 들었습니다.
How much playing time would you be expecting to get, and how do you feel about getting to work with a striker like Kyogo?
뭐 그건 감독님만이 아시겠죠. 제가 잘한다면 많이 뛸 거고, 못한다면 많이 못 뛸 거고.
The league in Scotland is known for being very physical. Are there any changes that you need to make to your game, if any, to adapt to that physical style of play?
뭐 그 선수들이 저를 강하게 한다면 저도 더 강하게 할 거고. 네. 뭐 저는 강하고 빠르니까 그걸로 대처하겠습니다.
Welcome to Celtic. The manager spoke yesterday about it being quite a long, drawn-out process for you to sign. How was it for you? How excited are you to be here now?
그 과정이 힘들었지만 이렇게 오게 돼서 정말 행복한 것 같습니다.
We've not played football in a few months. What have you been doing to keep yourself fit?
경기만 안 뛰었을 뿐이지 계속 운동을 하고 있었고, 제 스스로도 항상 지금 한국은 비시즌이지만 셀틱은 이 스코틀랜드는 리그 중이기 때문에 그걸 생각하면서 저도 맞춰가면서 가서 바로 경기에 뛸 수 있게끔 컨디션을 올리고 있었습니다.
Welcome to Celtic. I was just wondering, do you have any personal targets for this season or for your Celtic career in general?
득점왕을 하고 싶습니다.
Hi, welcome to Celtic. Previously, there have been South Korean players at Celtic, such as Hyeongyu Oh. Were you aware of Celtic when they were here, and was there any news in South Korea about Celtic at the time?
네, 저도 항상 어릴 때 그 아버지가 여기 셀틱 경기를 하면은 항상 TV를 틀어놨었고, 네, 이런 선수들 골 넣을 때마다 정말 같이 행복했었던 그런 기억이 있어가지고 그 시절 그 선수들이 꿈을 키우게 해준 선수들이었는데 이렇게 셀틱에 그 TV에서 보던 셀틱에 오게 되어서 정말 행복합니다.
For a new signing coming to the club, what like to find out more about the club? What do you do? Do you watch YouTube videos? Do you read articles? What is it done?
처음으로는 글래스코 이 도시에 대해서 알아봤고, 그리고 이 셀틱의 셀틱의 뭐라 그러죠? 전통이라 그래야 되나? 셀틱의 그런 역사를 알아봤고.
What kind of goals does he score? Because I've seen the compilations and headers are in there, poachers goals, untidy goals, some good ones as well.
Yeah, well, all his goals last season came inside the box, so that's where he does his damage. He's not afraid to have it pop from outside the box, and they're not far away, but he's definitely, doing most of his damage inside the box. Probably within like the kind of 12-yard area between the goal, and very good at following up on the rebounds, them scrappy ones. And he got a few goals from the set pieces, headers and stuff. And a few, Suwon's main threat was from set pieces and corners and kind of wing play. So he was inside the box and good movement, getting on the end of crosses and stuff.
Right. Okay. So sounds probably more like Giacomakis than Hyeongyu. Hyeongyu can certainly, be a poacher, but it really sounds like. I mean, I love a player like that, a player who scores the untidy goals. I mean, Gary Hooper was one of my favourite players, 10 plus years ago. So if O's someone like that, I guess fans are going to like him. Just on that point, Ange actually asked about what fans will think of him yesterday. Ange said he gets his hands dirty, he works hard, he loves a goal. For a young guy, he's only 21, his goals kept his club up last year. So it's not like he's coming from a club that was doing well, creating bags of opportunities, which shows his character. I think Celtic fans will warm to him very quickly. The whole gets his hands dirty. What's your thoughts on that?
Yeah, I think he's got him spot on there. Yeah, I think he's just that fierce competitor that I mentioned. Rarely loses a duel really, or can come back and work on both sides of the ball. It's extremely fit, and he'll be quite well suited, I think, to like that press inside. And any time the game that last goal that he got for Suwon, which kept them up, was in the 120th minute in the playoffs there, so he can keep going all day.
Yeah, that's exciting as well, and I don't know if you've seen the interview with Ange Postecoglou, but he looked genuinely buzzing with O. Like I thought he looked delighted to have landed his man.
Ange, and I think O is like, some of his quotes are pretty fantastic. Similarly, he feels like he's on a movie set, and I
don't know about that. I mean, Glasgow. I think they filmed Indiana Jones recently, but other than that,
there we go. It was kind of Glasgow weather. I think seeing the first training session. So train spotting maybe or something.
What as we say, he likes to score goals, get started. You talk about maybe bits that he can work on. Is it the build-up play?
I would say so, and concentration as well for a young player is nothing too unusual. He missed a good good few chances as well. In like that game against FC Seoul where he got 2 goals, could have had 4. He missed an open net. That can happen. But I think generally he wasn't really allowed, or Suwon didn't have much of a attack, any kind of attacking patterns really, other than get the ball to the wide areas and try to hold it up. So he wasn't really allowed to show that side of him that much. So he's still young. He definitely improve that, and I'm sure he will, because he's got all the attributes to do that.
Where is he viewed in terms of the South Korea national team? I think he's played once, potentially in a pre-World Cup friendly. I think it was against Iceland. Is he seen as a future international regular, do you think?
I think this move will push him into that conversation, but that one cap that he had was kind of like a B international with the Iceland side, and there was no European players from Korea either, but he made it. And he didn't make it to the World Cup, but he was that 27th man. I don't know if he was the only person at the World Cup.
So he was in Qatar.
Yeah, he's training with all them guys, and they've all been hugely positive about how well he looked. And Son Heung-min was one who spoke about him, and he kind of, just with his form, kind of forced his way in there towards the end of the season. He wasn't part of any other squad before that one, and I think now this move has opened up the door, especially with Korea's striking situation, which hasn't been great, and they have Hyeongyu Oh, who I think's the parent club of Nottingham Forest, but he's in a bit of kind of purgatory at the minute because of these transfer dealings with Olympiacos, and he's fallen out of favour there. So at the minute, I would say O would be second choice to Cho Gu-sung. So
can we mention Cho? That was actually my next question. How does he compare to Cho, both in terms of playing style and maybe current ability and potential as well?
That's a good one. They played together when they were in the army side. Cho was more well, I think they both took turns like playing on the out wide, but I would say they're both number nines really. But Joe uses his height much more and kind of protecting the ball, whereas O would be more that kind of fox in the box, like sniffing out them goal opportunities. Potential wise, yeah, I would say they're on the same level very much. I would say maybe even O could be better than Cho Gusong, but it's very close between them. They'll be kind of fighting out, I think, for maybe that number 9 spot for Korea if O does do well for Celtic.
And maybe Celtic as well. I've not given up all hope yet of Cho signing, but you never know. Final thoughts on this O deal? I mean, he's young at 21, real potential, but someone you think who can contribute pretty quickly as well and score goals?
Yeah, I'm very, very excited to see how he gets on. That 5-year deal is very intriguing, and I think that kind of shows you what Celtic think of him. And he'll work hard, even if it's not necessarily working at first. I'm sure he'll work hard and get in there. And I think Celtic is bound to get plenty of chances, far more than he got at Suwon Blue Wings. So I'm very positive on the kind of outlook for O, and hopefully he won't be first choice, obviously, but I think he can come on and definitely do a job.
He almost single-handedly kept Suwon Blue Wings up, which is nothing to like, because Blue Wings are not the nicest team in the world. I mean, they're kind of like the Rangers of Korea. Right. So you can safely say that I've only liked O for about 48 hours. Prior to that, I actually hated them. But he scored twice against Songnam in like 2 separate games last year. But the last game that we played, he completely destroyed us. I mean, he just ran through us. Like he could have scored 4 or 5 that day. That's something I will say. He doesn't score sitters, if that makes sense. Like he'll kind of sclaff a lot of chances. They could put a lot of the easy ones by the post, and then he'll just score this this kind of goal from nothing. But he really kicked on probably from about July, August, maybe. I think he won like the Player of the Year, the Player of the Month award in September, which was mainly because he scored 2 goals against like the biggest rivals in Korea, which is like the biggest game. It's called the Super Match because at one point it was like the biggest game in Asia, and that's Suwon Blue Wings versus FC Seoul. And at Seoul World Cup Stadium, he just destroyed them. I mean, he kind of ran them ragged. They were 3-0 up. He scored the first and the third goal. Then he just I mean, he's just like a really strong, quick, powerful striker. And it's I'm kind of really looking forward to him. Especially up against Rangers. I'm looking forward to him kind of up against Goldson and Barisic and that kind of thing.
Yeah, the thing I'm most intrigued about him is the work rate and the putting himself about. I think that's the big thing. Obviously, the goals are what he'll be measured on, but I really feel, especially if Giakoumakis is leaving, that we really need that up front. And we actually spoke to him earlier today. Some really good answers in there, some interesting bits about his fitness and getting to know Glasgow, and he spoke about his dad putting on Celtic games years ago when Key and Cha were playing for Celtic. Some other answers he didn't give a lot away. I guess he's speaking in English. He's 21 years old in an unfamiliar environment, and I guess he'll want to do his talking on the pitch as well. But he tends to have, Koreans in general tend to speak relatively good English, footballers anyway.
I mean, I think he's. I mean, one of the things that's kind of interesting about his story as well is that he did his military service at 18, which is really unusual here. I mean, most players kind of try and delay it as long as possible. They kind of try and get their name first in Korea, then maybe get the move to like a Jeonbuk or a Ulsan or something. But made that decision really early to kind of go to the military service, and I think he kind of made that because he wanted to move to Europe. And I think, that's a big part of why he speaks English as well. I mean, I think this has been something that I imagine he's been kind of preparing for quite a long time. So, it's like I think Key went to Australia when he was younger. That's why Key's English was so good. I think has just kind of picked it up here. Playing with Suwon Blue Wings, they always have foreigners as well. They always have, they've had a couple of Australian players that were pretty good. They always have a few, 2 or 3 foreigners in their team. So I'm sure he's picked up a lot from them as well. Yeah.
Okay, that's good. Anything else you want to say about any big predictions you want to make? He said, interestingly, today that he wanted to be top scorer next season, by the way. You wouldn't have heard that.
So, I think he's really kind of motivated. I think he's got a really clear idea of what he wants. I think he's really kind of secure in himself as well. I mean, I think he's really kind of confident. The one thing I will say, I'll make a prediction at the end, but the one thing I will say that he does need to change, and pretty quickly, is he does like a penalty. He does like a foul. I mean, he kind of likes to drag. Let's be polite and say he likes to drag fouls out of defenders. And just like Kyogo last year, when everyone kind of pounced on him and started saying he was diving a lot, I think might, in the beginning, I think he might need to kind of rein that in a bit.
Okay.
One of the things that you find in Korea is everyone dives in Korea. I mean, it's they're kind of taught it almost at 15. They're taught, they kind of dive and get a penalty. If you can get a penalty instead of scoring, yeah, go for it. Actually, so he needs to get that's something that he probably needs to rid from his game. But yeah, definitely, I think he's going to score a lot of goals. As I said, he kind of played it. He played in the wing at the beginning of last season. Blue Wings were absolutely shocking, and I think the manager was just desperate. He just had to do something different, and he brought kind of in the middle. And I don't know, I can't remember exactly, but it was something like in the last 10 games that they scored a goal, he scored in 8 of the 10 games. I mean, wow. So if my friend who's the president of the Seoul CSC, that he knows a guy who was actually scouting for Celtic. Celtic have been watching players since last year, maybe even earlier actually. So if there was anyone watching strikers in Korea last season, Cho and Oh were the 2 that stood out. I mean, they were and Oh in that last 6 months was just prolific. I mean, he just couldn't stop scoring. So for me, once he gets up to speed with the game in Scotland, I think you're going to see someone who's going to score a lot of goals. I think he's going to, for me, I'm obviously excited to see Celtic games on TV here, hopefully again. Yeah. We haven't seen any since Key left, but I think he's going to score a lot of goals. And my prediction is maybe not top goal scorer, because I think Ange still kind of loves Kyogo. I don't know how those 2 are going to kind of play together. But he's definitely going to be up there. I mean, he's going to be within a couple of Kyogo, definitely.